real pistachio is very stable.
Hello and welcome to Gilli Pong analysis. Today we're going to take a look at a presentation I just made. And it's a certain philosophical understanding that I've been trying to integrate into my intelligence over the past few days and weeks and months, so to speak. I think it's best if we just go into it here. So this presentation is about what a worldview consists of, philosophically, and how to make the transcendental argument in your discussions and in your own intellect for you to comprehend. I've been trying to comprehend this for over the past few months, but let's just go straight into all this stuff here. Okay. So worldviews and the transcendental argument. What makes up a worldview? And what is the transcendental argument? First, I have a tiny intro, but just the definition of world and why our worldview matters. So worldviews are essential because they shape how people interpret their place in the world and interact with others. A person's worldview influences their sense of identity, ethical decisions, and social relationships, and even how they face life's challenges. Understanding one's worldview and the worldview of others can promote self-awareness, empathy, and mutual understanding across cultural and ideological differences. So what is the definition of the word world? It could be the earth, the physical realm in which we live in, including its geography, ecosystem, and natural phenomena. Example, temperature affects the entire world. Human civilization or society refers to all human beings, societies, and cultures collectively. Example, the world reacted to the news. A sphere of experience or activity can refer to specific domains of knowledge, experience, or interests. Example, the world of art is constantly evolving. Existence or reality as a whole, sometimes used to refer to all existence including possible worlds, life, and the cosmos. For example, philosophers debate the nature of the world. Personal or individual perception, the subjective experience or personal reality of an individual. Example, her family is her whole world. A worldview is usually thought of consisting of this combination of epistemology, ethics, and metaphysics. So let's just go into each one of them with a brief summary of what they consist of. So epistemology, the nature of knowledge. Epistemologists explore what it means to know something, often defining knowledge as justified true belief. For example, if you know something, it must be true. You must believe it, and you must have a justified reason to believe it. The sources of knowledge. This examines where knowledge comes from. Traditional sources include perception, knowledge gained through the senses. For example, seeing, hearing, touching. Reason, knowledge derived through logical reasoning and rational thought. Introspection, knowledge of one's own mental states, for example, emotions or beliefs. Testimony, knowledge from others' accounts, such as books, teachers, or experts. Skepticism. This involves questioning whether knowledge is even possible. Skeptics argue that we may never be able to attain certain knowledge about the world due to the limits in perception, language, or reason. Famous philosophical questions like, how do we know we are not in a simulation, are skeptical inquiries. Justification. Epistemology also examines how beliefs are justified. For a belief to be considered knowledge, it needs solid grounding or evidence. This has led to different theories like empiricism, the belief that knowledge comes primarily from sensory experience; rationalism, the belief that reason and logic are the main sources of knowledge; foundationalism, the idea that knowledge is built on basic beliefs that do not require justification from other beliefs. Second branch of philosophy, ethics. Ethics is the branch of philosophy that examines questions about what is morally right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust. It explores how people should act, what moral principle they should follow, and the reasons behind these principles. Ethics is central to human life, influencing our choices, relationships, and society as a whole. Meta-ethics. This explores the nature and meaning of moral beliefs. It asks foundational questions like what does good mean, and are moral values objective or subjective? Meta-ethics also examines whether morality is universal or culturally relative, and whether moral truths exist independently of human beliefs. This is very interesting, like when we are trying to understand the difference between objective and subjective. The basic understanding of objective is just you have an object. You have a cup. And it can be seen from the perspective of the cup, looking at you and looking at others, and that's objective, as seen from the object. And then you have subjective. You are the subject or the agent involved. So you have the subjective, mind-based, or the objective from the air within. Normative ethics. This focuses on establishing guidelines for what we ought to know. It provides frameworks for making moral decisions, including consequentialism, judging actions by their outcomes. The best known form is utilitarianism, which holds that actions are right if they maximize happiness or well-being. Deontology, developed by Immanuel Kant. This approach argues that certain actions are morally required or forbidden based on rules or duties, regardless of their consequences. Virtue ethics, which I abide to. Originating with Aristotle, virtue ethics emphasizes character, the cultivation of virtues like honesty, courage, and compassion as the basis for ethical behavior. I really want to follow this in my life. Try to understand Immanuel Kant's perspective, but the transcendental argument comes from him, so we will go into that later. Applied ethics, we're still in ethics, the second part of what creates a worldview. We have medical ethics, the question of life, death, patient rights, and medical practices. Environmental ethics, ethical concerns about our relationship with nature, conservation, and sustainability. The global warming thing. That has been used against us in a way, but it's also a very good thing to, you don't, like, why do we put poo from a dog in a plastic bag and throw it in the trash? Why do we do that? Is it morally wrong to let the dog shit on the pavement people are walking on? Or is it morally wrong to put the poor garbage man having to deal with a bag of shit? This is a very good conversation starter. Makes people, think. Business ethics. The ethics of corporate behavior, responsibilities to stakeholders, and fair trade practices. People sometimes in these big corporations are getting these ethical, laws of the ethical structure of the corporation. This is what we consider ethical. And then we have moral psychology. We're still in ethics. This examines how psychological factors influence moral decisions and behaviors. It explores questions like what motivates us to act morally, and how do emotions, culture, and upbringing shape our ethics. The best example would be like a person who has been raised poor versus a person who has had a lot of money through their life. Then the poor person usually would easily, like, it would attest the ethics of that person, because they would try to take, for instance, money from somebody who has more than they, and they would morally justify that more easily. And it also could be the billionaire that wants more, and he will unethically try to claim as much as he wants. So both facts are there stealing somehow. But when you go into understanding the spectrum of morality in the world, you can be quite amazed how big it is. Part of us. Now we go into the gravity, metaphysics. So metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that examines the fundamental nature of reality, existence, and the universe, or omniverse. It goes beyond the physical sciences to explore questions about what is beyond or behind the observable world. Metaphysics addresses some of the deepest questions in philosophy, often grouped into the following core areas. Ontology, the study of being, existence, and the categories of reality. Ontology explores questions like, what does it mean to exist? And what kinds of things exist? It examines entities such as physical objects and abstract concepts like numbers, and even possible worlds. This is a very good test. You ask someone, there are 7 coconuts in front of you. What makes it 7? Or where is the 7 in the coconuts? Or in relationship to the coconuts. Where is the 7? And materialists, some I've heard say, it's in the coconuts. The numbers are there, because there are 7 of them. But where is the 7? It's conceptual. It's an abstract concept called numbers that we use to define how many of them are. And they're here, not there. You see. And even possible worlds. That goes into this string theory and quantum physics about wormholes, that black holes are actually wormholes into another universe. Marvel universe. Multiverse! Okay. Identity and change. Identity and change. Metaphysics asks how objects and beings remain the same over time, even though they might change in some aspects. For instance, it explores questions like what makes a person the same person from birth to death, and how do things change without becoming entirely different. Space and time. This area examines the nature of space and time. Philosophers ask whether time is linear or cyclical or an illusion, and whether space is a container for objects or something created by the relationships between objects. Very interesting thing. And we have Einstein talking about bendy space-time. That's gravity. All in the head. Causality and free will, or in the mind, not in the head, that's material, in the mind, in the conceptual, in the metaphysical. Causality and free will. Metaphysics investigates the nature of cause and effect. From cause comes an effect, as well as whether human beings have free will, or if all events are determined by prior causes. It raises questions such as, are events caused by previous events? And do humans have true freedom to make choices? Possibility and necessity. Metaphysicians explore what it means for something to be possible, necessary, or contingent. I had to look this one up. Contingent. It's like, it could be rain tomorrow, but that's contingent on the weather. It's contingent on the clouds being up there. If it's gonna not be have clouds, it's very possible it won't rain. So it's contingent. That's what that word means. Thank you. This is linked to modal thinking, which studies concepts like what could be and what must be. For example, is it possible that world exists where the laws of physics are different? Mind or consciousness. Metaphysics explores the relationship between the mind and the body, seeking to understand what consciousness is, how it relates to the physical brain. This includes questions like, is consciousness separate from the physical world? And what is the nature of subjective experience? Subjective. Objective. And then the last thing in the metaphysics, before we go and understand the transcendental argument, that is the divine and the ultimate reality. Many metaphysical discussions include the nature of a higher reality, divinity, or God. This can involve exploring questions like, does an ultimate reality exist? And is there a purpose or design to the universe? Or omniverse? So, here we are, at these crossroads, where we are going to understand the transcendental argument. A transcendental argument is a type of philosophical reasoning that aims to show that certain concepts, beliefs, or conditions are necessary for the possibility of experience, knowledge, or a meaningful discourse, two people talking, instead of proving a claim directly. A transcendental argument attempts to show that without accepting certain conditions, we could not make sense of experience or thought at all. Conditions for possibility. Transcendental arguments seek to identify the underlying conditions that make something possible. For example, rather than directly proving the existence of an external world, a transcendental argument might try to show that we must assume an external world exists in order to make sense of our perceptions. Origin. This form of argument was famously developed by Immanuel Kant, who used it to argue for the conditions that make experience possible. Kant argued that certain concepts like space, time, and causality are necessary for us to experience the world, not because they describe external reality itself, but because they structure our perception of it. You see how deep this shit is? Sorry for cursing, but see. So, an example of Kantian philosophy. Kant's transcendental argument for causality asserts that causality must be a condition of experience, because without it, we could not perceive events as ordered or related. We could not make sense of one thing following another in a meaningful way without assuming causality as a framework. So in modern uses, transcendental arguments are also used to counter skepticism. For instance, some philosophers use transcendental arguments to show that doubting the existence of other minds or an external world is incoherent because these doubts themselves rely on concepts like language, consistency, or evidence that presuppose an external reality or other minds. So, this has been this little presentation I made regarding this subject. And I think it's extremely important for everyone to kind of go into this figure out what is your worldview. What do you take for granted as something that somebody just told you? And once I heard there are 3 degrees of knowing, you know from hearing it or reading it. You know from seeing someone go through it, or you know through your own experience. And these are kind of categories of knowing. And the first one requires a belief that maybe you don't even need evidence for what you know. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. And if you reached so far, I hope you take a look at more of my videos and have the most beautiful present moment now and always. Thank you.
Gilli Pong analyzes